50 brides, one wedding night, 50 gruesome murders, and an eternal punishment that echoes through the halls of Greek myth. What could drive 50 sisters to commit the same horrifying act on the same night? Who were the Danaides, and what secret curse doomed them for eternity? Today, we unlock one of the darkest myths of ancient Greece, a tale of betrayal, vengeance, blood, and punishment beyond death. This isn't just a myth, it's a mirror into the ancient world's fears, power struggles, and the price of defiance. Stay with us, because this story only gets darker. To understand the horror of what happened on that fateful night, we must first go back to the very beginning. The Danaides were the 50 daughters of Danaides, the king of Libya. Danaides himself was the twin brother of Egyptus, the king of Egypt. These two brothers, though born of the same bloodline, were destined to be bitter rivals. Their feud would become the seed of destruction for the next generation. According to myth, Egyptus had 50 sons, 50 proud, ambitious men hungry for power. In a desperate move to unite the kingdoms, or perhaps to assert dominance, Egyptus proposed that his 50 sons should marry the 50 daughters of Danaides. On the surface, this seems like a grand alliance. But to Danaides, it reeked of manipulation, submission, and a potential power grab. He feared that his daughters would become pawns, and that he, too, would fall under Egyptus' control. In a calculated act of rebellion, Danaides fled with all his daughters from Libya to Argos, in Greece. This journey itself was monumental. Danaides wasn't just fleeing marriage, he was rejecting the very idea of forced political union. Upon reaching Argos, the local king accepted him, and Danaides was made king of the land. But peace would not last long. Egyptus and his sons followed. Pressured and cornered, Danaides had no choice but to agree to the marriages, but he had a deadly plan in mind. The myth takes a chilling turn here. On the eve of the weddings, Danaides gave each of his daughters a dagger and a command. They were to marry their assigned husbands, but kill them on the wedding night. Think about that. 50 sisters, each marrying a cousin they likely barely knew or deeply distrusted, being told by their own father to commit murder. This moment captures the heavy theme of obedience versus morality that haunts the Danaides story. The wedding night arrived, and so did the bloodshed. In perhaps the most chilling collective act in Greek mythology, 49 of the 50 Danaides carried out their father's order. In the dead of night, they killed their new husbands, sons of Egyptus, each act echoing the last like a death bell tolling over generations of rivalry and mistrust. The myth doesn't glorify this, it emphasizes the horror, the psychological weight, and the emotional chaos of that night. But one sister did not obey. Hypermnestra, the eldest daughter, spared her husband Lynceus. Why? Because, as some versions say, Lynceus respected her virginity and did not force himself upon her. This act of compassion in a story so filled with violence is profound. Hypermnestra made a choice based on love, or at the very least, mutual respect, defying her father's command and altering the destiny of the house of Danaides forever. Lynceus would later become king, and with Hypermnestra, they founded a line that included heroes like Perseus, slayer of Medusa. So even amid horror, myth often leaves room for redemption and legacy. But what happened to the other sisters, the 49 murderers? Here's where the story veers into a supernatural realm. After their crimes, the Danaides were condemned. But their punishment was not given in the mortal world, it was after death, in the realm of Hades. For eternity, the Danaides were sentenced to fill a bottomless basin with water. They carried leaking jars or sieves containers with holes. No matter how much water they poured, it would always drain out. A punishment of futility, endless labor with no result. The symbolism here is breathtaking. Their crime, a betrayal of marriage and love, was answered with a punishment of hopeless repetition. Their jars, like their souls, could never be filled. The punishment of the Danaides is perhaps one of the most haunting images in Greek mythology. 50 women, forever condemned to carry water in leaking vessels to fill a basin that can never be filled. It's a vision of eternal futility, of endless effort without reward, of striving without success. But why this punishment? Why leaking jars? Why endless repetition? And why this cruel poetic justice? To answer that, we must look beyond the myth and into the mind, into human psychology, ancient symbolism, and the way guilt echoes through time. At the core, the punishment of the Danaides is about guilt, betrayal, and the rejection of sacred trust. In the ancient Greek world, marriage was not just a romantic union, it was a sacred contract, a binding societal cornerstone. To violate it, especially in such a brutal and collective way, was more than a crime. It was an offense against the divine order, the gods themselves, and the values that held civilization together. By murdering their husbands, the Danaides didn't just kill men, they killed trust, union, and the most intimate form of agreement between two people. Their punishment, then, had to reflect the emotional void they created. The leaking jars are symbolic of broken trust. No matter how much you try to repair or rebuild it, it cannot hold. The damage is permanent. Psychologically, the Danaides' endless labor mirrors the condition of repressed guilt. In mythology, punishment is often internalized, not just inflicted. The leaking jars represent trauma, a kind of internal wound that bleeds forever. Every time the sisters attempt to atone, to fill the basin, the pain resurfaces. It's a metaphor for those trapped in cycles of remorse, repeating actions or rituals, hoping to cleanse themselves, but never achieving redemption. This idea of futile repetition as punishment is echoed in many myths. Sisyphus, condemned to push a boulder uphill forever, is perhaps the most famous. But the Danaides are different. They are women, victims and perpetrators at once, caught between their father's will and their own. Their punishment may even be read as a reflection of how ancient societies viewed female agency: dangerous, chaotic, and in need of eternal control. And yet, there's something deeply modern about their torment. In our time, we often talk about people being stuck in cycles, toxic relationships, repeated mistakes, emotional labor that never seems to end. The Danaides are, in a way, the mythic embodiment of burnout, of emotional wounds that can't be healed by doing more. Their jars leak because their souls leak. No amount of physical effort can fix spiritual damage. And in that sense, their punishment is not just mythic, it's tragically human. Now let's dive into symbolism. Water, throughout mythology, represents purity, life, and cleansing. The Danaides are forced to handle water, to purify themselves, perhaps. But the holes in their vessels ensure the failure of every attempt. It's like being handed salvation, but in a form that can never save you. It's like trying to fix a relationship or your mental health, using tools that are already broken. The jar, too, is a potent symbol. In ancient Greece, women were often likened to vessels, keepers of life, bearers of children, symbols of nurture. But the Danaides have become leaky jars, unable to carry life, unable to nurture, broken by their own actions or the system that forced them into those actions. Their punishment, then, is not just external. It's a twisted reflection of their femininity turned inside out. One could also argue that the myth explores generational trauma. Danaides made the decision to order the murders. The daughters carried it out, most without questioning. Was it loyalty? Fear? Indoctrination? We don't know. But the result was the same. Tragedy passed down like an inheritance. In modern psychology, we understand how trauma can be passed from one generation to another, not just genetically, but emotionally, behaviorally, even spiritually. The Danaides, in that context, are victims of a father's fear, shaped into murderers by a heritage of paranoia and rivalry. And yet, within all this darkness, the myth offers one point of light: Hypermnestra. Her choice to defy Danaides, to spare Lynceus, is often overshadowed by the mass killing, but it's critical. She shows that agency is possible, that even in systems designed to trap and destroy, a single act of compassion can rewrite destiny. Her story, though quieter, is the most powerful, because through her, the myth whispers a deeper truth. You are not doomed to repeat the past. You can break the cycle. In modern terms, Hypermnestra represents moral courage. The kind of courage that stands up to authority, not out of rebellion, but out of conscience. And that courage has consequences. She was put on trial by her own father. She faced isolation. But in the end, her story continued, while her sisters remained trapped in futility. In choosing not to kill, she found life. In resisting the cycle, she created legacy. While the myth of the Danaides is rooted in ancient Greece, its influence has rippled across centuries, reappearing in literature, theater, paintings, operas, and even modern psychology. Their story, one of betrayal, defiance, and eternal punishment, has fascinated writers, artists, and thinkers for thousands of years. Why does this myth endure? Because at its heart, the tale of the Danaides isn't just about 50 women. It's about human nature, moral conflict, rebellion, and redemption. It is, in many ways, timeless. The Danaides first entered the literary world through Aeschylus' ancient tragedy, The Suppliants, circa 463 BCE, where the daughters flee from Egypt to Argos to escape forced marriages. This version emphasizes their desperation and courage rather than their later crimes. It's important to note that in Aeschylus' trilogy, now lost except for the Suppliants, the story likely included their eventual murders and punishments. Yet even in this early work, the emotional complexity of the sisters was central, not just their actions, but their internal struggles as daughters torn between loyalty and fear. This complexity made the Danaides compelling subjects for later writers. During the Roman period, Ovid and other poets alluded to their tale when discussing feudal labor and punishment, often alongside Sisyphus and Tantalus. The image of the leaking jar became a powerful metaphor for impossible penance, one that caught the imagination of the Roman world and remained a literary trope through the Middle Ages and Renaissance. In the visual arts, the Danaides inspired countless painters, particularly during the neoclassical period of the 18th and 19th centuries. Artists such as Gustave Moreau and John William Waterhouse depicted them as tragic heroines, pale, exhausted, yet eerily beautiful, often holding broken water vessels beside dark rivers symbolizing the underworld. These paintings didn't just show punishment, they explored female suffering, psychological. In the end, what does the story of the Danaides really tell us? Strip away the mythical names, the gods, and the underworld, and you're left with something terrifyingly human. You're left with betrayal and loyalty, power and resistance, the haunting echo of trauma passed down through generations, and perhaps most chilling of all, futility, the never-ending act of trying to fix something that will never be whole again. The Danaides, with their leaky jars, are not just figures in a forgotten myth. They are timeless mirrors, reflecting some of the deepest struggles of the human soul. Why has this myth survived for over 3,000 years? Because at its heart, it's a story of unresolved pain. These women were torn between duty to their father and their own moral compass. They were forced into marriages, then ordered to destroy the very bonds they were told to honor. The horror of their wedding night wasn't just the murders, it was the dehumanization they endured. They weren't brides. They were pawns in a war between men. They were vessels, ironically, like the leaking jars they now carry in Hades, used, emptied, and punished. And yet, one woman refused. Hypermnestra's act may seem small, sparing one life. But in mythology, small acts often change everything. Her choice rewrote fate. Through her and Lynceus, a lineage was born that included Perseus, the slayer of Medusa, and eventually even Heracles, the greatest of Greek heroes. This single moment of defiance reminds us that even in the darkest legends, there is a seed of hope. Redemption does not erase the pain, but it offers direction, a future, a purpose. So why should we care about the Danaides today? Because we are them. We fill leaking jars every day. We chase happiness in all the wrong places, approval, likes, endless work, shallow relationships, and wonder why we feel so empty. We inherit trauma, absorb guilt, carry burdens that aren't ours. We labor endlessly for validation or peace or love that slips through our fingers like water. But the story of the Danaides also offers us a choice. You can keep filling the jar. You can stay in Hades. Or you can be like Hypermnestra. You can choose to break the cycle, to love instead of destroy, to act with courage when fear demands obedience, to become a new beginning in a legacy of sorrow. This is not just mythology. It's psychology. It's history. It's humanity. And that's why, thousands of years later, the Danaides still haunt us. Not because of what they did, but because of what they reveal about who we are. If this story stirred your thoughts, opened your eyes, or even gave you chills, then subscribe to Legacy of History Vault, where the past is more alive than ever. We go beyond textbooks, diving into the shadows, truths, and legends that shaped our world. Hit the bell icon so you never miss the stories history tried to bury. Because here, we don't just tell history, we uncover it.